Today's conversation is all about navigating online safety for teens, navigating truth, traffickers, and tech. I'm so excited for today's conversation, y'all, because we've talked about the ways that predators lurk online before. We're going to get a lot more specific in today's conversation, though, and I'm happy to have Sarah Nevels here with us as an expert to talk about that. But we haven't talked about the rise of mis and disinformation online, mis and disinformation online, and also the way that deep fakes and AI are being used, and the ways that our young people are very vulnerable to this. And so we have an expert who's going to be joining. Her name is Isosa Osa from a group called Onyx Impact, and their work is all around navigating information online and how dis and misinformation spreads. As a matter of fact, I want her to start off by giving us the definition of both because they are two different concepts. So we'll give folks another minute or two to get in. I will give my whole spiel all over, but I wanted to welcome y'all in the meantime.
My name is Sosa Osa. I'm the founder and CEO of Onyx Impact. We're a nonprofit organization that is focused on creating healthier online spaces for Black communities in particular. We research, understand Black people are engaging with information online, and we put together resources and programs to help Black folks access better information.
I love that. Navigating healthy spaces online is exactly what we're going to be talking about today with Isosa and also Sarah Neville. Sarah, can you introduce yourself for folks who may not know you?
Yes, so I am Sarah Nevels. I work for Gwen's Girls. I am community engagement as well as involved in the Caring Connections for Youth pre-arrest, pre-diversion program. I also do a lot of work in anti-trafficking spaces, including helping run an organization which is called Eden's Farm, which is a supportive housing program, and I'm also a survivor of exploitation.
Thank you, Sarah, for joining us. And can you say a bit about Detective Osmond, just in case she might be able to join us today?
Yeah, so Detective Danielle Ostman is with the Special Victims Unit, specifically the Anti-Trafficking Unit here in the City of Pittsburgh Police Department. She was going to assist us, but they are in the middle of a very large investigation, and I'm sure also spread very thin and taking on many different hats because of the storm. So she is maybe not going to be available, but maybe will jump in.
Thank you, Sarah. I know you will hold us down today, and our conversation is all around online safety for teens. Online safety for teens. And we know here at Gwen's Girls, we provide holistic services to Black girls and gender expansive youth in Pittsburgh and Allegheny County. And we want to just talk about how they are navigating truth, traffickers, and tech. And as I was saying before folks logged on, one of the things that we have done before is explore this space around predators and online safety, the commercial sex trafficking of young people, etc. But we've not also thought about how the current online landscape in disinformation may be playing into that and making our young people especially vulnerable. So we're going to kick off first with Isosa because I do want you please to give us just a few definitions because I think we often use mis and disinformation interchangeably. And a new term that you introduced to me was online manipulation. So just give us some definitions, please.
Yeah, absolutely. So, this is something called the information disorder spectrum, also called like what is the spectrum of lies, right? And so we've got misinformation, which is any incorrect information you may come across. Things like incorrect polling hours, right? And then disinformation, it requires intent. It's lies with the intent to lie. And so if somebody is actively pushing incorrect information to our children, right, they are actively spreading disinformation. And then there is malinformation and which is a form of manipulation, which is using true information or kernels of truth in order to harm people or harm communities. This can be anything from hacked materials to doxing someone online to using someone's to exposing folks' personal or private messages or photos online to taking kernels of information about current and historic harms and using them as an excuse to move people into more dangerous spaces. So, um, again, we can just call all of these lies. They're all incredibly harmful. And I'm happy to be able to be here today to talk about how we can push back in this context.
Thank you. So, because I can't help to think about how much time our young people spend online and how vulnerable they are to this. And I mean, we know, obviously, we've known for some time at least how their vulnerability works to making predators them more easily reached by predators. But being easily reached by lies is also something that they are navigating right now. I was just on TikTok earlier this week and I was scrolling and I saw a person talking and I didn't have the audio on. But what came across, like he had as a banner across it, like a news station, was Pete Hegseth stepped down. And I thought to myself, the defense secretary stepped down. Oh my God, I haven't watched the news. Like, let me go and run and like Google this. And of course, he has not stepped down. Of course, it was a lie. And as a matter of fact, the person was talking about something that had nothing to do with Pete Hegseth. And so I thought to myself, if I, as a grown attorney, could have just saw that passively and thought it was true, what does that mean for our young people in the ways they are being targeted? So thank you for that definition. So Sarah, I want to bring you into the conversation because when we talk about lies and manipulation, what are some of the most common ways traffickers and predators we find are reaching teens online? I remember back in the day, it was like chat rooms, right? What's being done today?
So it is still a lot of chat rooms. It's a lot of apps within apps. So for instance, Snapchat is somewhere, and Roblox is another one where you can have apps within apps. So they're targeting in gaming rooms as well. And a lot of it is even just as simple as creating a profile on Facebook, Instagram, pretending to be a certain person, a certain age, maybe even someone you used to go to school with, someone who maybe you went to school with in elementary school and they moved out of the area, but now someone has created a Instagram or a Facebook page using that person's information and pretending to be that person. So we've had a lot of that happen. And it's just really just falsifying who you are and creating some type of profile and starting, adding some pictures, putting a few posts up, and then you're good to go.
Yeah, and with so many people having a digital footprint, it's so easy to grab
Mhm.
a picture from somewhere online
Right.
for sure. What are some of the lesser known but high risk online behaviors that parents and advocates often overlook?
Again, creating a false kind of narrative behind someone who's real. So you think you're talking to someone that you actually do know, but that's not who you're really talking to. I think that's the one that catches people the most. And then also pretending to be a different age, living in a community that you don't live in, pretending, to be part of a social group that, like, for instance, we just had one of the youth that we're working with in my other organization. Um, Someone pretended to be part of an LGBTQ community and was absolutely not, and used that space, which was supposed to be a safe space, was supposed to be a space where, you could find community. And they were really just preying on the people in that space and preying on those vulnerabilities. So I think vulnerabilities are the biggest avenue, and the biggest concern is, we all have vulnerabilities. Vulnerabilities can be things like low self-esteem, can be feeling a little bit lonely or isolated, feeling like I don't fit in completely, or I don't have this real strong, great friend group, or I feel alone. My parents aren't connecting with me. They're not as invested as they should be. Or for whatever reason, there's a hole somewhere. There's this space, this vulnerability. And then people can use that vulnerability against me, and they can fill that need or that space. And it's grooming. Grooming is another one. Grooming is a huge, huge way that, you know, our youth are vulnerable, that all people are vulnerable.
Talk about it. I was just thinking to myself as an abuse survivor, when you talk about that hole that needs to be filled, I can definitely relate to that and that being exploited. But I'm happy you used the word vulnerability because I want to bring Isosa in here, and you all throughout the conversation, we may be pivoting back and forth, but I know y'all can stick with us. Feel free also to unmute or raise your hand and chime in. But on the topic of vulnerabilities, in what ways do you find that social media manipulation, like misinformation that you just discussed, fake profiles, viral scams, create vulnerabilities that might be unique for teens and young people?
Yeah, absolutely. And you know, going to speak to this problem particularly from the standpoint of young people of color. And we know that in particular, Black children are facing unique online dangers from social media due to racism, due to algorithmic bias, and cyberbullying. You know, there's a joint Center for Economic Policy just released a study this week with Spencer Overton showing that Black folks overall are exposed to harmful information and harassment about 31% more. And when you take that and you look at um, black teenagers, black teenagers are particularly vulnerable and being 5 times more likely than their white peers to experience cyberbullying online. The psychological toll that this can take is so severe, and it's something that we don't talk about enough, because we use words like reducing, rolling back content moderation policy or what have you, right? Like, what does that mean? That means that we're allowing more anti-blackness, we're allowing more discrimination, we're allowing more cyberbullying language onto these platforms, and we're disproportionately exposing our Black youth to these harms. And so while tech companies have been given this free pass for allowing more and more hate speech, that's why it's so important for state-based, for organizations like y'all, right, to be here, be having these conversations, and providing meaningful paths to hold um, these companies accountable and to protect our children.
5 times higher is wild behavior. That is wild. Do we
Five
know
times
why?
higher is wild behavior.
That is wild. Do we know why? Like why that disparity? What's the root of that?
I think when you look at when you talk about harassment, you look at the most vulnerable groups, the most likely types of harassment, right? You're going to get race-based harassment, you're going to get gender-based harassment, right? You're going to get um, sexual orientation-based harassment. And if you're part of any of these more targeted groups, overall, you're going to be disproportionately targeted in some of these, in many of these platforms, right? And some we go through this on in the digital green book. Some of these platforms have better policies than others. Some of these platforms have entire whole languages, created around really harmful terms and ideology, to the point where they like kids they're not even aware of what they're saying or what the background of the words they're saying are. And so it creates this really harmful permission structure for online engagement with each other, what well before, again, we've been able to teach the digital knowledge, education, digital savviness that's going to be necessary for our kids to be able to navigate these spaces.
That's so true. So do you mind saying the name of the report again? Because both Eva and Maureen are asking about it in the chat.
Yes, this is the Joint Center for Political and Economic Studies. Here, I will drop it in the chat. It's a three-part brief. The overall If you want to read the full policy paper by Spencer Overton, I highly recommend it as well. Really, there's such a need, as many of you know, to make sure that we can quantify the harms happening to vulnerable communities, and that's why this type of work that they're doing is so important, because uh, without the papers like the ones that we're seeing, right, it's a bunch of anecdotes, right, it's
Yeah.
a bunch of I'm like, how do you can you prove it, right, and so we need both stories and narratives and data to be able to affect change.
Thank you for that. I once heard somebody say, we research what matters, and what matters we research. And so it's not surprising to me that we're still struggling to know exactly how all of this is happening within Black communities. So thank you for that, Isosa. So that brings me to a question I want to ask both of you from your vantage points, which is, how do we teach teens? I don't want to use the word critical thinking, because how do we teach teens online safety, especially as it relates to what they see and what they share online? We are in such a markedly different world than the world that we grew up in, the three of us. How do we teach safety? Sarah, I'll start with you.
So I think first we have to have a proactive line of communication with our teens, and they have to have multiple, not just their parents and their caregivers, but also, for instance, Gwen's Girl staff, right? In our after school program, staff at school, supports in the community, and different people talking to them, because oftentimes if it's just a parent, it doesn't hold as much weight. But when I hear it multiple times from multiple different sources, and sources that I am connected with, that I trust, I'm more likely to listen to it, right? I think we need to be talking about we need to be very real, not just scare tactics, but very real. We need to be talking about what you put on social media stays there, even if it can be removed, even if it is, because I think our young people often think Snapchat, right? Because it leaves very quickly. But no, it can be screenshotted, it can be passed to this person and that person. And that digital footprint, really talking about what that digital footprint is, what it means, and how sustaining it is, and how it can come back up. Talking to them about the images that they share, right? So any photos that you share, make sure that you're comfortable with it being shared, because the likelihood of it being shared is quite possible. Also recognizing that we've had situations where someone has shared a completely innocent and appropriate picture, and then it's been deep faked to add a nude image to it, and then it's out there. So really talking about what all of that means, talking about, if something like that happens, don't think you're alone. Don't think that it hasn't happened before. Don't think that you're stuck in that there are resources, there are amazing supports out there. There are programs that can help remove some of that digital footprint and can help clean some of that up. But again, you're not the first person this has happened to, and it is not the end of the world. So there are places that you can go for help. There are people who have experienced this and maybe even experienced worse. So don't isolate yourself in that situation. I think also it's really important to talk to our kids about what ifs. How do you look for a fake profile? What do you pay attention to? I always tell people, and this is very true for me, people always say, all the work that you do, how do you not have so many friends on your Facebook page? Because if I don't know you, I am not accepting your friend requests. If I wouldn't see you in a grocery store and wouldn't recognize you, then I am not accepting your friend request. So it's not about how many friends you have, but are those people you actually really do know? Being very careful when you accept new requests, and paying attention to, again, is that a legit page? Reaching out to that person if you happen to have their phone number, and just making sure, hey, I just got a new friend request from you. Is that you? Being very careful with, again, on all, I'm only on Facebook, so I really only know a lot about Facebook, but Instagram, Snapchat, all of those things, locations, turn off your locations. Recognize that Snapchat and several other apps have multiple places you have to turn off the locations. You can't just turn off on your phone and think that that covers you, because it does not. And then also use those privacy settings. Use them and go online. There are places like Blue Campaign, which is a Pennsylvania resource. Blue Campaign is they have whole YouTube videos on how to do privacy settings for all the different apps. Parents, there's lots of resources so that you can set up. I had my 4-year-old last weekend, and he was on his tablet, which is an Amazon tablet. I have it set up with some privacy settings, and he was watching something that was Paw Patrol. But I started listening to it, and it was saying wildly inappropriate things over and over and over again. And because it was Paw Patrol, and because it came through as Paw Patrol, the parental controls did not block it. And it was absolutely inappropriate.
I can't agree more with everything that Sarah has said, and again, I keep saying, and I want to keep and how important of a conversation that this is to have, because of how much harm is happening to our kids. And I will answer your question, but I want to make sure we start with that there is that tech companies have to be held responsible for um, the harm the harm they are doing to our children. I know a foundation recently released a report called, like, it was like lock screens, right? It was they put together like who the children that have unfortunately um, passed, right? The Lost Green Memorial by the Archwell Foundation. So this is a memorial released last week, or released, yeah, early this week, that shows that uplifts the stories of children that we have lost due to social media, harms, due to cyberbullying trends that they have engaged in, right? And shows, the last photos their parents had of them on their phones, right? These folks, if love was enough, if then all of these children would still be alive, right? But it is, I do not want to lessen the need for accountability of the harms that have happened. And while we push for that, right, there are ways that we can help mitigate these risks, that parents can help mitigate these risks, right? That's part of the reason that Onyx Impact, we created the Digital Green Book. You can find it at digitalgreenbook.org, right? How do we protect our truth, protect our kids, and protect our culture, right? We've got six steps that parents can take to protect their children online. And this is a lot. I understand that this is a lot. If you don't have time for 6 steps because you've got a whole life to live, there's just one at the top that says download these apps, right? Download these apps to help that will help monitor how your kids are interacting online. But what can we do? What should we be? What should parents be doing? Again, to what Sarah mentioned, we've got step one, guide their social media use and encourage offline activities, right? So parental controls are a default that we need to make sure that we have set on, and make sure that they understand which platforms they can use and how much time they can spend on them. And creating some simple, like, tech-free zones in your home. Maybe that's mealtime, maybe that's bedtime, to ensure that we're teaching healthy digital habits. So that's step one. Step two, let's actually spend the time, to Sarah's point, teaching digital knowledge, and certain types of digital critical thinking skills. Uh, it's important to know that 42% of all social media online activities are malicious bad bots in comment sections and creating fake headlines. Right? I'm just gonna say that one more time: 42% of social online traffic are bad bots, inauthentic bots, uh, in comment sections and creating fake headlines. That is fundamentally warping what we believe to be true and not. Right? We need to make sure our kids understand that. We need to help them recognize biased, racist, harmful content at a young age. Right? Make sure that they understand that the harm that that content, often disguised as jokes, can still have. Right? We need to make sure that they're questioning what they see online and teaching them about misinformation and propaganda. So teaching digital knowledge is that second step. And then uh, talking about online safety and privacy. Exactly. Once again, what Sarah, you went through a ton of this. Uh, what it means to not share personal information. So, what the risks of cyberbullying, predator scams, all of this stuff are, and how they're not going to be alone if it happens to them. And then, you know, four is something I think that we don't talk about enough. Like, how are we protecting their mental health and self-esteem? Um, Social media is distorting realities. It's creating unrealistic beauty standards. Like, this is not real life, y'all. This is not how people look, act, behave. Right? I've never seen a red balloon being popped in my life personally. Uh, but we need to make sure that kids understand that this is not all of the trauma that you see online is real and authentic. And, we got to make sure we're encouraging self-love and confidence, and you know, making sure that they're following content that does that. Like, what type of positive content is your kids following? What type of super, like, black joy, black excellence, you know wonderful, like, good content, and we make sure that your kids are following. I think that's a really important step: encouraging positive and uplifting content. Introduce them to influencers, creators. Look, they don't even have to love them, right? But if they're part of their feed, right, the algorithm is going to take that into account and move more good content into their social media feed. So, if you go to the digitalgreenbook.org, you can find detailed guides for how to do all of these. So, to Sarah's point, you go to digitalgreenbook.org, we'll go through every single platform and what to do to limit, to add parental controls and limit what kids can see. This is, going to be such an important fight for us to have over the years, and our community as a whole, and we can provide the tools and resources needed to help our children navigate this digital world with safety and security in mind. And that's part of why Honest Impact exists.
And I would say two more really important things. One, as a parent, are you modeling appropriate social media behavior as well? Do you have settings? Are you, like, we're constantly modeling for our youth. So make sure that as the adult, you're modeling appropriately as well. And the other thing I would say is be up in their business. Be up in your children's business and in your nieces and your nephews and all the young people around you. And you don't have to do it in a way that, you can do it in a playful way and in a connected way. It doesn't have to be a punitive or punishment or I don't trust you sort of way. But if you're up in their business, then you know more about what's going on. And they're more likely to talk to you when something goes wrong.
And everybody experiences a very different internet. You can be sitting beside your best friend. My best friend and I actually did this the other day for a podcast episode. We switched phones, we switched Instagrams to see what was coming down her feed and what was coming down mine. So a simple exercise like, give me my phone.
I like that.
Give me your, you mine. let's just see what you let's see what you see. I want to find some new accounts to follow and just kind of encourage active exploration, and to Isos's point, actually broadening the digital kind of reach. Like, who's coming down your timeline, and how can I, as the adult in your life that cares about you, help to influence that to ensure you have some diversity. Think we do it with so many things in our young people's lives. And now is the time for us to think about that as far as social media is concerned as well. Another question for both of you from your vantage points again is, what are the signs that we should be aware of as far as a teenager's behavior that is a signal that online exploitation or some form of manipulation may have occurred? Like, they've been under either attack by like the bias and the mis and disinformation online, and or they are within a predator's reach. I'll start with you, Sarah.
So I think it's going to look similar to bullying that isn't cyber related, but I think isolating and withdrawing, um, hiding their phone, not talking about their phone, constantly on whatever social medias, almost an obsession with social media, bringing that to different spaces. Like, I saw this on social media, I saw that on social media, or I heard this on social media. I would be concerned about that. And I think Asosa made a really good point about, do they have non-social media, non-electronic activities? And if they aren't doing anything outside of that, that's an issue. And if you start seeing them not, like their friend group changes, and you start seeing them not participating in things that you know they did enjoy doing, whether that's dance, whether that's, the Boys and Girls Club, basketball, whatever it might be. If you see a change in behaviors, if you see a change in reactions to things, those are all things that I would be really paying attention to.
Um, I would agree with Sarah again wholeheartedly. I think what's most important is constant communication, because the signs can look different for each kid, right? And that constant communication will ensure that you know when how they communicate, when how they're feeling, their body language has changed, and you can start asking those questions, and making sure that they're talking both to you and to anyone else that they need to talk to.
Thank you for that. Sarah, can we go back for a second, because I realized that I didn't ask specific questions about just how do we know online grooming is occurring? You've mentioned the word grooming, but from an exploiter standpoint, what does that look like in a digital space?
So, I mean, again, it looks like creating a fake profile to be relatable, right? But yet you're older. Um, it looks like, oh, you're trying to how do I want to word this? Manipulate fake connection, manipulate information so that you feel like you and I have something in common, right? To feel like, you know, um, we're the same age, we live in the same community, we have the same woes. I feel lonely too, or I'm frustrated too, or my parents are too strict. Um, oh, they don't trust you. Little things like that. Just really paying attention to those little red flags, and they're usually very subtle. But it's if someone is trying way too hard to be relatable, if someone is trying way too hard to convince me that they're just like me, right? If someone says something along the lines of, well, they're withholding information, they're asking you a lot of questions, but they're not really giving much information back. Like, how old are you? What's your favorite food? And where do you go to school? What are your friends like? What do you enjoy doing? But you start to see they're not answering the same questions. They're fishing for information. They're trying to gather a whole database of information about me, so that one, they can find ways to relate, but also I am then more susceptible because you know more about me than I know about you. If you ask them questions like, how old are you? And they say, old enough, right? Evasive answers. Or what kind of job do you have? And all they do is, oh, I hate my job, but don't tell you any real information. Again, if they're just being a little bit gray area, evasive, not really giving a lot of information, those are all red flags. Those are all things that say, yeah, this person maybe isn't. Absolute blaring red flag, send up the lights, asking you to meet them somewhere, or even asking location type questions. Those are things that you want to hold really carefully, because once you give that information, you can't take it back. If they're asking you to meet them somewhere, and I would say, even something as simple as giving your phone number, don't give your phone number. Keep it on those other platforms. Don't give your phone number until you're really, really comfortable. Don't ever meet anyone anywhere for any reason. I don't care what it is. Also, we see a lot of grooming happening. Well, this isn't necessarily grooming. We see a lot of dangerous area with jobs, with potential jobs, with you know, things, especially right now, summertime, possible employment options, or I can't even think of the word I'm trying to say. But somebody like offering you a job or saying, oh, my uncle owns a hotel. He's hiring right now. He's hiring high school students for summertime help, and not legit. So just be really careful about those things as well. Does that answer your question, Tashira?
No, it does. I was trying to get to some of those specific examples that you gave. Thank you. Just the small questions that may seem innocuous, but we know are loaded. It made me think of
And
another.
one more thing, I truly believe in this, and I believe in this in so many different spaces, but if it's too good to be true, it's too good to be true, period.
Yeah, yeah, 100%. It made me think of a question for both of you, Sarah, when you were talking about those kind of small behaviors. Um, What are some of the tools that we think adults should be employing day to day? And this is for you, Isosa, especially. Like, it starts with, as Sarah said, us modeling behaviors for young people. But again, I almost got last week, right? What do the adults need to be doing as well? Is it different from the teens? How can we be a lot more inquisitive around the information that we're seeing online?
Absolutely, absolutely. This is so important, modeling good behavior. I think one of the things that we need to do is model um, good sources of information. Are we? Uh, how do we show our kids that we're going to trusted sites for our news on a day-to-day basis too? We need to be hyper cognizant of emotionally charged information, emotionally charged posts, right? And call them out. When we see them, like, hey, look, this is obviously trying to get progressives or conservatives up in arms about something, right? It's not true, but look how many times it's been shared. Talk about how that can be harmful, right? Make sure that we are looking for things like hate being disguised as free speech, right?
Yeah,
And pointing that out when we see it, and uh, explaining the harms. There are so many different things that adults can be doing. Again, we go through a lot of them at the digitalgreenbook.org to be modeling good behavior for our kids, higher levels of skepticism for online content, um, and just being able to mentally weather the manipulation and harm that is part of unfortunately part of everyday experiences on the internet.
Shira, we can't hear you.
Can you tell us the statistic that I've heard you say before, Isosa, about how many times do we have to hear a lie before we think it's a fact?
Oh, yes, of course. So the number of times I think is going to be dependent on the person, but the point is that we've got to understand that this is not something that only some people need to worry about. Right? Disinformation works on everybody. Disinformation works on everybody, regardless of your background, regardless of your income, your education, what have you. And that is because our brains work in a very similar way, regardless of all those things, right? And what does that mean when I say that our brains work in a very similar way? Guess what? The more times you hear something, the more likely you are to believe it's true, and the more likely you are to believe other people believe it's true as well. Our brains substitute repetition for truth. It is how we teach our kids things when they're young, right? We just tell them over and over and over again. It's how our brains are still functioning to take in and accept information. It's why the amplification effects of social media are so harmful, because it's never been easier to put the same lie in front of somebody 20 times in a day. It's never been, and therefore it's never been easier to convince people of things that aren't true. And so we've got to understand that and have empathy for people that believe a lot of these lies, because it's something that can happen to all of us. Like, look, if you know the president of the United States, let's pretend, let's just make it up a new one, right? If the president of the United States came out every single day and said the sky was green, and every newspaper had to report on that he said that, even if it was a lie, and every social media platform was talking about it, it was going viral, everything. Eventually, we would all be like, I'm pretty sure the sky is blue, but maybe he's talking about different hues in different seasons, or maybe he's talking about like, well, it would impact all of us over time. And so I think that's always important to keep in mind you know as we're scrolling, that this is something that can impact all of us, and we need to be careful and mindful of it.
Thank you, Isosa. And folks, please do share any questions for our experts in the chat. My last question before opening it up is to you both, because I can hear a young person, especially a teenager, saying this: you just don't get it, you don't understand, it's funny, it's a joke, this person is my friend. To Sarah's knowledge and expertise, to Isosa, you don't understand, this is trending audio, mom, you just don't understand it. How do we overcome that when we are talking to a young person, because they're just going to assume it's a digital divide? It's another example of the way my loved one, the person who is older than me in my life, does not get me. Whoever wants to jump in first.
So I will say, I'm going to lean into it. You're absolutely right. I don't. Help me understand. And I'm gonna ask some open-ended questions, and I'm gonna pick their brain and not put forth my beliefs and thoughts, and get them to I'm gonna use motivational interviewing type open-ended questions, getting the gears rolling, getting them to think about, well, what if this and what if that, and has this ever happened? Do you know anyone that this has happened to? And really try to get their brain to think it instead of me giving it to them.
Yeah, I agree. Making sure, being open in conversations, asking questions in conversations is always a better way to make sure that folks intake information. But also, repetition, right? It equals truth for our brain. And like, even if it is not necessarily, even if it doesn't seem like it's sinking in, over time, you telling you explaining this to your kids over and over again, it's going to have an impact. They're going to be thinking about it. as they're moving through, this new digital age. And so this isn't a one-time conversation. It's got to be a perpetual conversation in order to have, I think, the impact and the protection that we're looking for here.
And it feels like a conversation should be had younger as well. To Sarah's point, and that's happened to my nephew before as well. Like he was watching a YouTube video of Mickey Mouse, and all of a sudden you hear all this swearing coming from Mickey. And I just thought to myself, who would do that? Like who would actually use a cartoon character in this way? So having conversations younger, I'm hearing you all say ask open-ended questions, lean into the fact that they say we don't understand and say we don't understand, help us to understand, and get them to actually state a position and why they're drawn to this person, to this information, etc. But to our audience, do you have any questions for Isosa and Sarah? I've also dropped down in the chat a link to the digital green book that Isosa has mentioned, as well as a PDF around how we protect our young people in the digital age. Any questions? And feel free to unmute or to just jump
I
in.
put a question. I put a question in the chat if I could ask. I,
Sure, please do
I
so.
have taught and researched pornography and porn culture. And I want to say I'm not necessarily anti-porn, but what I know is the average age at which a boy watches it for the first time is 11. And I just think that it's everywhere. When one of you talked about the ways in which kids stumble onto sites that are pornographic sites. I mean, I knew a little boy 5 years old who liked butts and Googled butts, and it opened up a whole horrible world for him. So, in terms of both media literacy, but also how do we talk to kids about pornography as part of a kind of almost like a grooming tool, right? To sexualize kids. So that's my question. And I just think what you just said, both of you, in terms of how hard it can be to talk to your kids, especially when they're young, it's a real challenge. So I don't know. What do you think?
So for me, I mean, I believe that, I there's this quote by Fred Rogers that what is mentionable is manageable. The talking might be hard, and I'm not getting the quote exactly right. The talking might be hard to mention, and it might be a hard conversation, but again, what is mentionable is manageable. I am very much about comprehensive sex education at very early but age appropriate ways, constantly, consistently, and from multiple sources of trusted sources. So I think we need to be talking about these things, and we can't pretend that if we don't talk about it, our kids are never going to get exposed to it, because that doesn't work. Um, but I think talking to them about those images, about things that they might see, about sexuality as a whole, again, and our bodies, so that we are arming them with information, accurate information, and we are layering protection.
Sarah, and I love that quote. I'd never heard it. It's awesome.
And thank you for bringing in comprehensive sex ed. It's so important.
It's so BGEA of me.
It's on brand. And I see Mary said, thank you for the presentation. Thank you for joining, Mary. Any other questions? So I want our panelists to give us some last words. I know there may be other questions, and if they pop in the chat, I'll turn my attention there. But Sarah, what is a key takeaway for you that you want everyone to leave today's conversation with?
So I think my key takeaway is, again, creating that proactive line of communication, consistent communication, checking in with our kids, talking about them, talking to them about all the things that are uncomfortable for us to talk about. Because if it's uncomfortable for you to talk about, it's uncomfortable for them to experience. And it is a risk area, it is a vulnerability for them. So get comfortable with what's not comfortable. Talk to your kids often. Again, check in with them. Talk to their friends too, because sometimes when you talk to them as a group, that helps. And you don't know who's talking to those other kids, and those kids are also talking to your child. So that's where that misinformation can come in. So if I'm talking to all of my daughter's friends or all of my son's friends, and we're having those same kinds of conversations, and do it in a way that it's connected and not corrective. That would be my key takeaways.
Okay, connected and not corrective. And I'm gonna add in as an addendum or a footnote, asking questions
Mhm.
versus leading judgment might help with that based upon what you said today.
Absolutely.
Andy Sosa.
Yeah, absolutely. And I hope that it's okay for me to take this opportunity, I think, to uplift the stories of why this type of why this is such an important conversation, why we're so committed, at its impact, and everyone on this call, to making sure that our kids are protected, because this is from the Archwell Foundation's Lost Screen Memorial. This is England Madison Roberts, and this is her story as told by her parents, Brandy and Tony. England was a vibrant teenage girl. She was the baby of the family, and at only 14 years of age is when she died by suicide in September of 2020. She was the epitome of love with a genuine caring spirit. England loves music and dance and was into the latest fashion. She loved to travel, but also enjoyed spending time with her family during cookouts. And when Brandy and Tony started going back through England's phone, they started scouring her social media account for answers, and they found massive amounts of self-harm themed content and pages posted by her and her friends. They saw Instagram presenting them with these harm themed content and harm themed pages, including one in September of 2019 depicting a woman harming herself. We know, according to Brandy and Tony, they say that we know England was fed self-harm content by the platform's algorithm. And the deeper she fell, the darker it got. Brandy and Tony are advocating for a safer online space for kids. They say, quote, "We want better safeguards in place so no other parent experiences this silent killer. We want people to know that children deserve better experiences when they venture online. We'd like to see a button for platforms to send an alert to big tech companies when children receive inappropriate content or self-harm videos. We also believe there should be warning labels when children first get on these platforms. We know lawmakers can do something to help. What are they waiting for? What are they waiting for? This is not a unique story to England. I wish it were. But I think it is fundamentally necessary to start putting these stories in the faces of the people who have been harmed by these platforms, by these technologies, and demanding that they stand to account for what they've done and what we need to do in order to ensure that our kids will be protected. They cannot, this free pass cannot continue. So I'm there. And I appreciate all of you deeply for having me today for this conversation.
Thank you so much, Isosa. I got chills. Yeah. And I think that's what we wanted today, not to scare our audience, both here today and part of the replay crew, but to just raise awareness. And thank you for putting that structural framework in place, Isosa. So you all, the replay will be available. We'll make sure that it gets posted on YouTube and we share it out via our email listserv. We will see you again next month for another component of our She Matters webinar series. Make sure you save the date for our 10th annual Equity Summit happening in September. Have a good day. We'll see you soon.
Thank you.